Okay, I have it at 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started. We have a quorum of 7 commissioners tonight. The City of Evanston's Preservation Ordinance empowers this body to safeguard our community's historic, cultural, and architectural heritage. The Commission encourages, encourages public participation and affords due process through public hearings on proposed landmark designations and applications for certificates of appropriateness. The ordinance requires commissioners to apply specific review standards and includes the ability to consider economic hardship and special merit as needed. We ask all members of the public, as well as the applicants present, to be respectful of tonight's proceedings and adopt the decorum necessary to facilitate impartial discussion and debate. We ask anyone who wishes to address the commission to sign in and indicate the discussion item, designation, or application to be addressed. The first order of business tonight will be public comment on items listed under discussion on the meeting agenda. For old and new business, the chair of the commission will ask staff to read each case into the record. Once a case has been read into the record, the applicant presents an overview of the proposal, including evidence and testimony that support the applicable standards being met. The commissioners will then ask questions of the applicant. Following the questioning period, members of the public may speak toward the application, keeping their comments to 3 minutes or less. Following public comment, the applicant will have the opportunity to rebut any evidence or testimony against the application as it relates to the standards for review. After all parties have had a final opportunity to make objections or corrections, the commission closes the record and proceeds to a motion and deliberation of the proposal. A simple majority of the quorum present is required for a motion to carry. Would staff please? Actually, we're going to start with public comment. Sorry. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to speak on the discussion item tonight, which is Chicago Avenue multimodal corridor improvements? Did anyone sign up online to speak? Okay, seeing none. The next item of business is a presentation from Evanston Rebuilding Exchange. Do we read this into the record, this little description? If you would please come and introduce yourself. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We've talked about roughly 10 minutes for a presentation.
I could talk all day, so you'll just need to tell me when to stop.
And then we'll have some questions and answers from the commission.
Good evening. I'm Mayna Gutierrez. I'm the Executive Director of the Rebuilding Exchange. I presented a few slides just to actually share more pictures than anything of what the Rebuilding Exchange does, as well as deconstruction specifically, and how that intersects with historic preservation, as well as the commission. So do I say next slide? Is that how we're going to do this? Okay. So for those of you that don't know us, and I hope actually all of you know us, we're a nonprofit social enterprise based in Evanston, and we do 3 things. We reuse building materials, we reduce construction waste, and we train and support and connect folks seeking careers in the building trades. We have 2 stores that are open to the public, one in Evanston, we're headquartered in Evanston, and one in Chicago in the Bucktown neighborhood, that are full of salvaged donated building material. And we divert more than 3 million pounds of building material a year from landfills. We do tons of educational and outreach programs in Evanston. Many of you have maybe come to our family build programs. We are piloting middle school woodworking, really putting tools into folks' hands, not only to have some fun and to work with reclaimed material, but also to learn more about your home and to have a safe and happy home. So we're piloting also workshops on like intro to HVAC, intro to plumbing and electrical. And then we are the only nonprofit deconstruction service provider. So we take apart houses by hand for recycling and reuse. And it's really sites for work-based learning. Our folks that are in our building trades programs are overcoming barriers and are working on the job, about 80%. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then we have two building trades training programs. One is transitional employment, and that's how our deconstruction services are done. And then just a year ago, we started a building trades pre-apprenticeship program to get folks into the union apprenticeships. So now we have two options for people, either what we call open shop employment or building trades union apprenticeship programs. If you know us in our early years, we have quadrupled in size in the last 5 years. And so we are a new and growing organization, and speaks, I think, a lot to the scale in which we're trying to address these complex environmental and employment issues. Next slide. So we have 3 social enterprise business lines, and deconstruction services is one of them. So we work with mostly residential homeowners that are seeking to do a home renovation project, and they hire us, and we can deconstruct their kitchens, their whole homes, bathrooms. We do all kinds of things. So this is one way that we generate revenue. Overall, our budget is about 45% earned revenue and 55% raised. So we do all the things most nonprofits do, plus run 3 businesses for good. Next slide. Our deconstruction services is also workforce training. So we serve, this is our transitional employment. We serve folks overcoming barriers to employment who want to get jobs in the building trades. And most of the time, if you can take something apart, you know how to put it back together. So our graduates go into everything from HVAC repair, handy services, painters, bricklayers, drywallers, the whole gamut. Next slide. We do what we call selective or partial deconstruction, which this is an example of a kitchen that we took apart for recycling and reuse. The tax benefit to homeowners is that it's a non-cash donation to a 501c3 nonprofit. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I can share. But the value of materials have a lot of value, and that makes the cost more competitive with demolition. Next slide. We also do structural complete deconstruction. So this is hard to see on the screen, but this is a house we took apart from roof down to foundation in Highland Park. It was a home from 1890 that had come to the end of its life, and we salvaged every bit of it using the folks in our training program. You can see a lot of the materials and kind of how that came to being. And you can't see at the top, but that's me on the roof with a hard hat. They let me on site sometimes. And next slide. So the impact, there's lots of impacts to deconstruction. Obviously, the waste diversion impact is huge. Up to 90% of our projects can be recycled or reused, which is huge. It's really talking about the weight of material that we stay out of landfills that can be reused, which helps with all kind of environmental issues, from lowering embodied carbon emissions and really maximizing and improving public health. These are a few of our employer partners. So our trainees are with us for 20 weeks, and then we help them get jobs. And we stay in touch with them forever, actually, but formally 2 years after graduation. And they always get a 50% discount in our store. So folks, like I said, go into all kinds of different employment opportunities in the trades. And then probably the most well-known hazard when we're taking apart, demolishing properties in our community is the public health hazard. So you're putting a bunch of dust, harmful dust, into the air, into the water, into the soil. So there's a lot of benefits to deconstruction, but this is one that's really important to us. Okay, so next slide. So I thought I'd show some pictures of some things we've done recently. This is the first project, and this is Hyper Evanston, and I thought might be of interest to the Historic Preservation Commission. So this is, we were hired by the North Shore YWCA, Evanston North Shore, in their campus renovation. So they took apart 2 houses that they were using for their domestic violence shelter and something else, can't remember, to create their beautiful new campus. And we were hired to take apart the interior. So if you can see on the next slide, we took a bunch of lath, like more lath than I have never seen so much lath in my life. And our trainees then configured it, if you want to look at the next slide, and they made it into a counter skirt that was all pieced together. So this is lath that's probably 100 years old, and that, go ahead to the next picture. And this is the renovation of Hune Bakery in Evanston. And if you buy their delicious and expensive products, you will see the corner skirt of the counter skirt of the space is full of more than 100-year-old lath that was harvested from the YWCA. So that was very cool. And actually a very interesting example. We don't do a lot of making. We tend to take things apart and reuse them. but we can make things. And we do make things, especially if there's a long-time partnership and an opportunity to beautify our community. About 40% of the folks we serve are Evanston residents, and so there's a lot of opportunity. People want to be a part of projects that they can see, that they're proud of, and that they can share with their friends and family. And so this is one example. The next example I thought was fun was the Wilmette Masonic Temple. I think in 2021, the developer hired us to do an interior structural deconstruction because they created apartments for seniors using the space. And if you drive past that space, it still says Masonic Temple high in the front. If you look to the next slide, you can see the space before we deconstructed it. And then the next picture is a space of what it looked like as we were doing the interior deconstruction. Tons of flooring, tons of architectural salvage, the lighting, the moldings. There were so many cool things from Masonic Temple. We even took, they had like an auditorium, like those old kind of velvety movie theater chairs, and we're able to resell those and redistribute those in the community. Next slide. And then, of course, the fun stuff, the organs and other things like that. So just giving two examples of the work that we do in the community that has a real preservation and historic, they tell a story. It's really a story of our community, and we want to keep that story within our community and to come up with new ways for people to use materials. Next slide. So there are a couple of growing, one question that was asked of me was to kind of give a sense of the landscape of deconstruction and what does it look like. It's a very niche thing. The number of times where I explain deconstruction to people and they're like, that makes sense. I've never heard of it, is widespread, even within Evanston. And we actually do most of our deconstruction work outside of Evanston, along the North Shore and in the city of Chicago, which makes me very sad because I am an Evanston resident and have been here for 12 years and live in the 5th Ward, and there are opportunities for deconstruction in my neighborhood that are not currently being realized. So there are a couple of growing opportunities I'm excited about. The first one is that more cities, not many, so there's opportunity for leadership there, more cities are looking at deconstruction, ways to incentivize and legislate deconstruction. The one that is probably most well known is Portland, Oregon, that now has an ordinance that requires any home that is built before 1940 to be deconstructed. You cannot demolish, you have to deconstruct, and has built an awesome marketplace of both deconstruction contractors and marketplace for reused materials. The big problem with deconstruction is you take the stuff apart and then where does it go? If there's no market for it, and you can look up the city of Milwaukee for an example of how it may not go right, you have to create a marketplace, a reuse marketplace, and we are your marketplace in Evanston and in Chicago, actually. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to legislate and mandate more of that. That goes well beyond our walls of what we're doing with a crew of 6 to 8 trainees and a supervisor year-round. So I'm happy to talk more about, there's a lot of opportunities around, folks are piloting grants, bid incentives, all kinds of different ways to encourage people to deconstruct. The second opportunity is the EPA, through the Inflation Reduction Act, is getting funded at unprecedented levels. And there is a lot of conversation right now about how reuse and deconstruction and salvage can help lower carbon emissions and contribute to the climate change initiatives that are all over the country. And so I'm excited about that. For folks that have been in this work for a long time, they keep saying like, unprecedented, never talked like this before. So I don't know what it looks like, but it's happening. And a couple weeks ago, I was on a call with 60 reuse and salvage leaders from across the country to give EPA feedback on what we think the potential is in the market. The biggest challenge we have is we're all tiny organizations and we need to scale. If any commercial construction company came to me and said, I need structural steel for a high-rise we're building, I'd be like, nope, we don't have that kind of stuff. But we should, and if we did, people would use it. And then next slide. And there are some challenges to deconstruction. Some of this I'm sure is not news to any of you. The first is just people knowing about it, as I mentioned. A lot of people know what demolition is, and they assume that demolition is the default, right? So if you're a homeowner who's renovating your kitchen and you've never renovated a kitchen before, because not many people do it more than once, demolition is what everyone does. And so how do we disrupt that narrative? How do we provide more education on deconstruction? The second is cost. Deconstruction is a job creator. There are 7 jobs in deconstruction for every 1 job in demolition. I think that's a good thing. We're creating an industry that is living wage careers for people, but it is more expensive. And the tax benefit helps, but until it's at scale, it's always going to be a little bit more expensive. And then also time. There are for-profit deconstruction companies in Chicago, a couple. They are faster than we are. We have the added workforce development training component, but it does take longer. It's a lot faster to smush everything up into a machine and throw it into a landfill. So it's just kind of getting at the beginning of the project. And the pictures here actually are one challenge that we've had recently with a property that's actually owned by the city of Evanston. If many of you have heard of the plot of land at Emerson and Jackson, which is actually a half block from my house between Asbury and Dodge. There are 7 properties, 7 homes that the city purchased and then did an RFP. And because the city owned the land, the project to demolish or deconstruct needed to be prevailing wage, which is about $45 an hour for a laborer. So if a deconstruction job is 7 people versus 1 person in demolition, no deconstruction providers, including ourselves, applied to the RFP because we wouldn't be cost competitive. However, the picture on below and above is the barn. And there is an Evanston barn that was converted into a garage on the property that has 100-year-old barnwood on it that I just can't give up. So we're going to take it apart for free. And we're working with Shorefront Legacy Archive to tell a story of that material in the 5th Ward. What was that barn used for? What does it mean to be home, and who are the people that lived in that neighborhood and used that space? And then how do we resalvage that material? So this is an example of something that we are doing for free, but that we wouldn't normally do. And so I think there is a challenge for city-owned property and any public works property that is going to have a prevailing wage, because workforce training wages don't count as part of the bid process. So just to give one example, but it's up now. You can't actually see it from the street. So if any of you drive by Emerson, you can't see it. You can see the graffiti house, which I can't wait for that thing to come down. But behind it is the barn and the garage. And so probably at the end of May, beginning of June, you'll see our crew out there, and we'll be in the round table and all of that. So just to give an example. And that was my very fast, I have no idea how much time I took, but that was my very fast overview. So thank you for having us, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. I was just about to say that, yeah. So that's good. I have a question that I would like to ask, and then, which is, can you, in like your elevator pitch, for what is the difference between demolition and deconstruction? Like just like the 1 or 2 sentence version of that.
So deconstruction is the environmentally friendly demolition, where everything that can be reused and recycled is. No one's ever actually asked me that before, so I just made that up.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. And actually, I think there's a lot of overlap between what you presented and the long-range plan that the commission just approved, because part of the Preserve 2040 plan is to, I guess, work on and advocate for a deconstruction ordinance.
Yes, I saw, and I'm very excited about that.
So, yeah, that would be, great if we, could get other resources. You said Portland had one, what was it, before 1940 that was mandatory?
Yep, so they actually did, as an example, a multi-phased project. So the first couple of years of their project was actually grants and incentives for homeowners to be encouraged to deconstruct, and then they used the data to demonstrate how successful it was to then introduce an ordinance. And their first ordinance that they passed was houses built before deconstruction of houses built before 1916, which was 100 years after, like the ordinance was in 2016, so they did 100 years. And then again, they built the groundwork and said, look, it's working. Now we have this marketplace, now we have all these contractors. And so the 1940 requirement, I think, was just 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of examples of folks taking baby steps, and again, I'm not a government employee, but I think that tends to be ways that governments work to kind of slowly inch forward and real systems change.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So many questions, actually. I have used you before. I bought like radiator covers for our old home. But recently, we were doing a reno. I feel like this is a week too late for me, actually, because we just demoed our kitchen. But I was just curious how you work with like the local contractors and architects, and I know we have some in the room. I'd love to hear what they have to say, because I'm not sure how many of you have done deconstruction versus demo, but I'd love to get like a little feedback here. Just wondering how you communicate with them, since I think for homeowners, they're the ones we're talking to. We're getting bids from them. We're asked, like, I asked the question, like, can we reuse any of this? And it was kind of like, not really. We can get the scrapper out here for some of this stuff, but for the most part, it was like, we can't. So,
Yeah, I think those are our influencers back
Yeah.
there, the contractors,
Exactly.
designers, and architects. And so how do we get the word out at the beginning of the process? We also, we're not a huge organization, but we would come out and give bids and estimates, and it is often the homeowner who needs to find us at this point. So I'm excited as we grow this business to get more connection. But yeah, we work with folks all the time, and have some regular architects who often are sharing information about our services to clients. So it's always about time and money, though. So it's really just like, is there enough time? Is there a flexible budget? Because it does tend to be more expensive. Is it really what the homeowner wants? But I hear your story all the time. People are like, if I had known, and for us, they'll donate the appliances and the cabinet sets, but not realize we can take them out as well.
yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and make sure it can be reused. So we do lots of things, so I'm working on the marketing.
So has anyone here done deconstruction? Any of the architects, or who's an architect or contractor designed to build? I think one? I'm putting you on the spot, but has anyone done deconstruction? No, okay. Would you consider it?
We-
Yeah. 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 Sure. Yeah. Okay. Are you as well, I know? You have? And it's, to homeowners, is it residential or commercial that has done it? Have you done?
Predominantly, it's a question of residential. She touched on every reason why it's a very difficult marketplace to get into. It's really not cost effective yet, and a lot of the materials that come out are really not usable in the new project. So it becomes a really difficult conversation because you don't want the stuff to go to a landfill, but you also want to have a place to warehouse an entire project's worth of, let's call it donated material. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done. I'll be curious to see where conversations about a deconstruction ordinance go, because it puts an enormous burden on homeowners
Yeah.
and renovators if it does go down that path. It's not a bad conversation to have, but I think it's a slippery
Yeah.
slope right now.
And I
Gary?
would say if you look up the Portland, Oregon.
Sorry.
Oh,
Gary, sorry about that. So they cannot hear when they're recording this meeting. They cannot hear people in the audience because you're not. So, I'm sorry.
I don't know if Gary has to come back up. but
No,
I
no.
would like to speak.
Well, I mean, we know that he's going to be making a presentation. So if you wanted to repeat what you just really quickly what you said when you're making your presentation, that you're welcome to do that. Sorry, but they can't hear it for the recording. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, I think that's right, in the sense of like the cost piece of it. If you do look at the data for Portland, Oregon, it does demonstrate, though, that as the ordinance has picked up steam and there's been a marketplace that's been built around deconstruction, the cost between demolition and deconstruction has shrunk considerably. And so I think there's a way to mitigate some of that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I will say that part of why we've expanded so rapidly and with 2 stores is that we want to be able to say, yes, we'll take your whole kitchen. And we just need a lot of room for that. Space is a real thing in reuse salvage materials.
I have another question. Were you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I have another one after you.
When you and I were talking about this presentation, I think you mentioned San Antonio. What is going on there? I mean, I have a sense of it, but if you wanted to just remind us of what is happening? Why did it come up in the conversation with you last week?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. So often when cities are taking on legislation or guidelines or incentives, it often comes from the environmental space and not necessarily the historic preservation space. And my understanding historically is sometimes there's been a little bit of tension there because I think a lot of your intent is to preserve buildings as they are, which is the best way actually, and I would agree with that. Deconstruction is when the building reaches the end of its life, and what do you do with the materials to be able to preserve them at that point? In San Antonio, all of the deconstruction initiatives come from the Office of Historic Preservation, which is the only city that I know of that has that particular structure, and they've grown quite a bit around it. And the idea is, and I don't know much about San Antonio, but that there's this rich history, and really preserving their cultural heritage very much aligns with historic preservation. And so and it's a booming city. And so as the population grows, there's been this movement to just take everything down and build up new. And so the office has really done a lot of work to be able to develop an ordinance. And actually San Antonio in population is bigger than Portland. So I think currently they're the largest city in the country that has a deconstruction ordinance. It was just passed last year. And it's all from the Office of Historic Preservation, which is pretty cool.
Commissioner Ziem, did you want to?
Yeah, so my other thought on this is, what do you do with stuff that's, like, I'm thinking of our house. We've gone to the extent to restore windows, but what do you do with a lot of the material I would imagine that you get has lead-based paint in it, as most of the old homes do. And so there's obviously some risks to, like, I feel like having that and like giving it to someone else who might not understand the materials, like the hazards around those materials. So I'm just curious, like, how you handle that, like with windows or whatever else that
Sure.
may have it.
Yeah, I mean, first thing is we probably only accept about 60% of what we're offered because our joke is, it's really only reused until it comes in and comes back out. If we keep everything in our store, we're just a landfill that's nicely merchandised, which is not the goal. So it's really, we aren't able to accept everything that we're offered. And a lot of those things, especially windows, can't be, they're not energy efficient. There's a lot of issues with, for example, old windows. They have lead-based paint. There are some things, so if we can sell it and we know the marketplace is there and we've been open since 2010, so we have a fair amount of experience of knowing what that market looks like, we know what we can accept. Outside of that, so some of those products we will take and then we'll do what we call creative reuse. And so we have artists who use antique windows for all kinds of things. And we have a lot of people who come in that space. And if you've been to our store recently, you'll see the toilets outside that are being used as flower planters. There's a lot of fun and creativity in that. To your answer about to your question about lead-based paint, yes, it is challenging. And for that reason, our staff and our trainees, part of the curriculum of our transitional employment program is they receive 3 marketable certifications. And one of them is the EPA RRP certification, which is the lead-based paint. And it's really for people to know the dangers of lead and a lot of those types of things and to be able to mitigate those in the handling of the materials. We also have laundry at our facility so people don't take that stuff home. So if they're on a construction site, they're not on public transportation, they're not washing their clothes with their kids' clothes. All of that is a real challenge. A few years ago, we had a survey done by a researcher at Columbia University on kind of just lead-based paint and the air in our store because we do have so many materials, and it actually wasn't any more elevated than an old home. So our general rule is don't mess with it. If it can stay contained, you want it to stay contained. But if there is a public health and safety risk, we won't accept it.
Because I was thinking, you mentioned like the barn and the boards, and that made me think, I would imagine that has lead-based paint, but that's something you guys are accepting, but you just kind of handle it with care. I guess
Yep.
that's their answer. Okay.
Yep. And don't let 5-year-olds walk around the store and chew on it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
generally.
sure.
Yeah, but it is a real challenge for all salvage materials. There's a lot of stuff there. It has a lot of history. So that's been our imperfect approach.
Okay.
So I think that we are going to finish up if anyone has any other questions.
Great.
Okay.
So it would behoove me if I don't remind you that we are located at 1245 Hartree in Evanston. We're the Green Building. We are open to the public 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days a week. So come see us, shop, play, do all the things, say hello. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. The next order of businesses on the agenda is meant to be new business, but we thought we'd move the discussion, no vote will be taken item to the top, the Chicago Avenue multinodal corridor improvements. That's just a presentation, right? So if you would like to come and introduce yourself and tell us about this project, and then we'll go on to new business. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Sat Nagar, I'm the Senior Project Manager in Capital Planning and Engineering, and I'm the City Project Manager for the Chicago Avenue Corridor Project. So this is a multimodal corridor that extends from the scope of, the limits of the project are from Howard Street all the way to Davis Street. In the last 3-4 years, we were able to rebuild Chicago Avenue and Sheridan Road from Davis going all the way up to the village of Wilmette limits. So now we have taken the section from basically Davis going all the way to Howard, just to make sure we can accommodate all different modes of transportation, like the bikes, the pedestrians, and the street itself is in pretty bad condition, as well as the sidewalks and the streetscapes. I have a quick presentation, Katie, if you want to move on to the next slide. So basically, this is the agenda. Why we are here is the Chicago Avenue within the limits. The Lakeshore Historic District does touch Chicago Avenue at 3 locations, one at Hamilton, and one south of Dempster, and one between Lake and Grove. So we just need your input in terms of we are staying within the right-of-way, within the roadway and the sidewalk. We are not doing anything outside the limits, but still we have to, since the street touches the historic district, we are here to make the presentation and let you guys know that there are no impacts. So the purpose of this, pretty much the project is how we are going to make Chicago Avenue more user-friendly for all the users, including the bikes. As I said, we are going to improve the roadway. The lighting is not up to standards. We are going to upgrade all the lights with the approved, street lights, what has been approved by the City Council, and then activate the public space and improve the streetscape. Basically, the existing concrete sidewalk has a lot of undulations and not safe. So we are going to provide our city standard, the brick paver sidewalk with the concrete, and have the trees the whole length. So these are the improvements we are planning along. Go to the next slide. So what we have done basically in terms of, this is the drawing you see shows the limits of the projects within the limits all the way from Howard. So we've indicated all the cross streets. So if you go to the next, this is just a corridor context map showing the limits. So this is basically what we have done is we have taken the entire corridor and explained into 4 different sections, how we are going to improve and what we are trying to do as a part of the project. So from Howard to south, already there is an existing bike lane. All we are trying to do is create a protected bike lane on the east side, like what we have along Chicago Avenue north of Davis, provide the bike lane on the east side so that the two-way users can use it and be safer. And most of the families and the kids prefer that, and that's how it is being safer. As well as right now, most of the Northwestern students do not ride on the street. They pretty much use the bike lane and they don't ride on the sidewalks either. So when we provide their own space for all different users, the roadway and the sidewalk becomes more stress less and more safer for all all types of modes of transportation. When you go to the next slide. So basically, I just wanted to highlight that what we have been doing on this project is we have talked to several different organizations throughout Evanston and outside the Evanston to make sure this is the project, what we are trying to do. So this is a list of the stakeholders that we have contacted so far since 2021. So we have been doing this project close to 2 years. This is the phase 1 part of this project. Once we finalize the phase 1, then we move on to the phase 2, where we are going to do the real construction plans. I want to go to the next slide. So this is a list of all the stakeholders, what we have done. So today, this is the last. Historic preservation is our last stop. So basically, we had 2 public meetings, and we have several advisory meetings with the aldermen, and we have explained what we are trying to do, and we have had a pretty much positive input from all of them so far. Yeah, so this is where I wanted to highlight these 3 sections. As you can see, Chicago Avenue from basically at Hamilton. There you can see that yellow that comes and just touches there, as well as the one between Dumpster and Greenwood, and then basically Greenwood to Grove. So these three sections, I don't want to complete the presentation. I want to have Tim. He's our consultant. Let me finish up the rest of the presentation just to go over the cross sections to show what we are doing at each of these locations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Gustafson, and as Sat mentioned, I'm the project manager on the consultant side for the project. And we wanted to provide you just an overview of what is the scope of improvement for the project. So while it does travel through the historic district, as you can see based on the boundaries, we are staying within the right-of-way limits for the project. But that being said, it's still important to see what the effects will be of the project. So this is an opportunity to show you what the proposed improvements will look like. If you move ahead to the next slide, there are two typical roadway sections within the area of interest for this conversation tonight. I'm showing the existing on the top row, so the roadway varies in width. The right-of-way varies in width between 66 feet and 68 feet, I think. Sorry, it's hard to see it at that distance. However, based on that information, what we're choosing to do is reallocate the existing roadway space so that we can make room for the improvements that Sat described. So this just gives you an idea of what it looks like today up top, and then reallocating that space down below. One of the things that I did want to highlight is that in the block where the historic district does dive across Chicago Avenue, it takes into account those buildings located at 607 Lake, 1415 Chicago, and 600 Grove, which is the Church of Evanston, the concert hall, and those beautiful buildings. Currently, parking is only permitted on Sundays and holidays on one of those sides of the street, or on both sides of the street through that block. Because of the available width and the proposed improvements, this project will allow it to be possible to park permanently on one side of the street after the construction is complete. So instead of only having parking one day a week and occasionally on holidays, this will actually allow you to park on one side of the street 7 days a week. So that would be the only substantive change to the performance of the roadway. Other than that, all of the other improvements that Sat describes would be included, including the separated two-way bike lane on the east side of the street. So this shows you kind of what the existing and proposed is for each of those conditions. And if you look at the next slide, we wanted to touch a little bit about what I'm calling the only vertical element in the entire project, but I did want to draw your attention to it because the streetlight fixtures, as Sat mentioned, the roadway is not up to the city's lighting standard. And I know there was a lot of discussion about what should the light fixtures look like citywide so that they're compatible with our interests visually and contextually. So there are two types of light fixtures that are proposed for this project, which are pretty much consistent with a lot of the roadway and streetscape projects that the city takes on. So we have the LED davit arm, which is the very basic looking swoop one in the photo, and then closer in proximity you can see this example from Fountain Square, as well as our rendered image on the right, showing what the Talmadge structure would look like. So these would be placed in an alternating pattern throughout the corridor. The davit gives better light, the Talmadge is better looking, so we tend to share a little bit of both when we install this type of infrastructure in the corridor. The image on the right shows how they would be placed in front of these buildings that are located in the Lakeshore Historic District, so we wanted to show you where they'd be placed relative to the improvements. The only thing I will say about this image is this shows an older version of the bike lane. We decided to put all of the bike lanes on the other side of the street, so there's actually no bike lane in front of the churches as proposed. Then I wanted to show you on the next slide what the proposed roadway plans look like in plan view. These are difficult to read at this scale, but this shows the three locations that we highlighted on the previous slide. The existing roadway would stay generally in the same exact place. All of the automobile travel lanes would shift ever so slightly to the west to make space for that two-way separated bike lane on the east. This image shows the Jewel parking lot and Hamilton Street and does not go beyond the right-of-way line. So again, just to reiterate, this all stays within the existing right-of-way limits. Sidewalk remains in place. Parking remains in place. The travel lanes are the ones that are skinnied up a little to make room for everything else. The only other thing I will point out is that this does provide the opportunity for the bus boarding islands, very similar to the ones that you see along the frontage in front of Northwestern University. So that will also be included in the project. On the next slide, you can see with the proposed plan, this is that one block where you don't have parking all the time, but now will be able to for a few spaces on the west side of the street. Again, a lane of automobile travel in each direction, two-way separated bike lane, sidewalks remain in place, and on-street parking is now added to the west side in front of those buildings. The last image is just the proposed plan as it connects into Davis. I'm personally quite excited about this because you'll no longer have the bike lane fishtail swoop that goes through the intersection. It'll actually just stay on the east side as it was always intended. So now you don't have the tail end of one project meeting a new one. It's going to look continuous and consistent throughout. So that's what the plans are showing. And what I did not mention is, as part of our research, we identified in red every building that's either on the register, has potential contributing factors, or was identified as having potential. So that's what's shown in callouts in red. They're all well beyond the right-of-way limits in each case. So with that, the final slide is basically me thanking you. And if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Zine, go ahead.
I just want to say I love this. There was recently an editorial in the Roundtable, I think, about protected bike lanes, more of them, and people, I think, definitely want it. I used to be, many moons ago, a student at Northwestern before the protected bike lanes, I think, and I rode my bike every day, and it was dangerous in the street. So I think this is great for the campus and to extend that. And I know this isn't necessarily what we're talking about today, but that addresses the north-south corridor, but would love to see additional plans that address the east-west part of the city, because there's no way to get over really and there's a lane on Church, but it's like quasi-protected for some of it, and it's not that. Some of those other ones I think need to be addressed too. It's not super safe.
Yeah, there's obviously always been an interest in improving the comfort and safety, and we have found as well that two-way separated bike lanes tend to give you that comfort and safety that you're looking for, because you have your own space, you can do your own movements, make your own decisions on your own terms, and you've got enough space to navigate through those intersections. So there is a pair of one-way bike lanes on Church and Davis respectively leading into and out of downtown. But that's the best thing that we hear is when we propose a project, people are saying, we like this, we want more of it, which is generally a good sign. So thank you.
Yeah, because I have kids, and I actually live on Church, so I'm very familiar with that and the Davis one, and I would love for my kids to ride their bike more, but I just don't feel like it's safe for them to do it. They're not as aware as an adult would be riding there. And
Certainly,
So,
yeah.
But anyway, I think this is great.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the historic park? Go ahead.
It's more of a comment. I just appreciate the inclusion of the Talmadge and the Davitt lights along Chicago Avenue, especially because it's bordering the historic district, and the Talmadge light is such a key element of the city. And I know that some people are like tree huggers, and some people in the city apparently are Talmadge huggers, and they really appreciate the Talmadge lights. So I do appreciate that, and I think that. Moving forward, it would be great to have that inclusion on the east-west, because I know that your city is eventually going to be discussing Oakton and Main Street with the lighting. So it would be good to have that cohesive look of the Davitt and Talmadge lights, wrap around to Oakton and Main, so that you have that cohesive look instead of, because Main Street right now has those lollipop lights, that don't really fit.
Yeah.
Anywhere else in the city. So
Yeah, Carl, I'm actually glad you mentioned that. One thing that we probably touched on is that the lighting fixtures themselves are actually what is recommended in the city's streetlight master plan. And in working on roadway and lighting projects, I found through this project and in working with SAT is that alternating between the Davitt and the Talmadge gives you the illumination you require, and also that visually aesthetic, pleasing experience with the architecture. So it tends to work really well too. So that's been a good thing that we've learned.
Just one more thing on Main Street, we'll be replacing those lights. We already have a project, it's been awarded, we'll be starting probably later this year or next year. So all those lollipop lights will be gone by next year, yes.
Anyone else? Questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to return on the agenda back to where we had been, to new business. And the first item on the agenda under new business is 1221 Hinman Avenue, Landmark Lakeshore Historic District, 23 Pres 0064. Okay. So Gary, you can start when you are ready.
Good evening. My name is Gary Shoemaker. I'm with Shoemaker Design Associates. We are the architects for the clients at 1221 Hinman, Jake and Katie Stevie. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the project that we have proposed. Let's see. There we go. So if you could go back to the existing plan for me, Kate. Thank you. This is an existing Dutch colonial / Queen Anne. This was built in the late 1800s. The majority of the front of the house and the screen porch is all original, relatively well cared for. Our clients are, I think, the third owners, and have tasked us with remodeling effectively the rear half of this house. Most of what we're touching has been previously renovated, so we're not undoing anything that was historic in fabric. In fact, we are restoring and recreating a lot of the work in this screen porch on the side. We are removing this existing deck and terrace system that was constructed, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, something like that. And we are taking apart a kitchen addition, reusing the foundations and expanding that just a little bit. We're also demolishing this garage and reconfiguring some of the paving in the backyard. So if you could give me the next slide, please, Kate. Thank you. So as you can see here, the three hatched areas are the areas of the addition. Our renovation project encompasses much more of this. You'll see that in the elevations. This is a small extension of the first floor that picks up an overhang on the existing rear of the house. This is a small infill addition beside the existing mass of the addition that we're remodeling and reconfiguring, and then a one-story greenhouse at grade. We're also tearing out, as I mentioned, the existing deck structure on the rear yard and creating a single level deck with some garden accent, some garden amenities, and a more generous stair to the backyard. And we're creating a new garage at the rear of the property that's also compatible with not only the existing fabric of the house, but the addition that we're proposing. If we could have a next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this section, actually, if you would, go back to the first two slides that show me the images of the existing house for me. I think they're the first two slides we had there. There we go. So the first addition that we're going to talk about on that section is this small infill. You can see this little corbelled section under this, what was likely a service quarters for the back of the house. We're infilling this section to complete a chamfered space for a family room in the rear of the house. This is the existing addition. We're not tearing all of this down. We're reusing foundations in some of the portions of this, but infilling this section. And you'll see that in the roof lines before. You can see pretty clearly that this structure, this shape, is original to the house. This is obviously not. So if you could, now we can go back to this will make a little more sense, I think. Okay, so this section is our addition that infills that what is currently an undermined section. That little corbel that you see has failed. The house needs some structural repair on the back corner. So we're infilling this and repairing the structure and bringing the wall out in order to rectify that room on the inside from a plan perspective. This is our addition. The infill section I mentioned to you here, this is the mass of the existing addition that we're reconfiguring, reglazing, and introducing a hip roof. If you remember for the earlier photographs and the subsequent renderings will show you this, there is a hip section of the roof up here, and there's an original hip section of the existing house up there. So what we're doing is really picking up on what was the architect's original intention for these secondary roofs. It's a large gambrel house of different scales and different proportions, but it's supplemented with a series of hipped roofs that surround the secondary volumes on the house. So we're continuing that philosophy as we run around the house. We are glazing the entire backside of this house. This is the kitchen addition in the back. All of the windows, all the fenestration that wrap around from the front of the house are effectively floor-to-ceiling windows. Some are picture windows, some are cottage windows, some are double-hung windows. All of the windows in the existing house we are faithfully restoring. We've engaged TMC to rebuild every one of these windows. We're already on their schedule, so that's happening. These will be Marvin Ultimate windows. They'll be Landmark Series windows, so they'll be compatible in size, scale, and aesthetic to the rest of the windows that will remain in the house. And our conservatory, our greenhouse structure, will be a faithfully constructed winter greenhouse. So it will be a functioning greenhouse, not a conservatory or a solarium. The porch addition over here that I mentioned, this is a single level. It's accented by three planters. Our clients aspire to grow most of their own food on the property, herbs and garden varieties of different things that they'll cultivate through the year. So these are intended to be raised planting beds that they can use during the growing seasons. This stair that comes down will serve as a trellis for an espalier that will grow on the front face of this wall. Indiana limestone paving that will connect this section of the house to the back where you'll see the garage in just a moment. And I think there was a question by the pre-review committee about the materiality of the back. Our intention is to use cedar fence panels to let these weather in silver. The materials that we have proposed for the deck will either be an Ipe or what is now becoming a bit more accessible, an Akoya product, which is a sustainable hardwood. So the idea of the rendering here is that this is the grade aged finish of the natural material. And for anyone who wants to touch it, I brought a piece of it. So if we could have the next slide, please. Again, another image of how this structure comes around the corner, the idea of the hip roof, which details very similarly to the one-story screen porch that exists on the south side of the house. We are faithfully replicating the balustrades, the railings. All of the porch columns on this house are rounded and detailed. We've commissioned millworkers to replicate those, so we'll be replicating faithfully all the details on the house, including the outriggers, which are more of the Queen Anne detailing on this house. We've used that for this major piece of the addition. It exists on the screen porch on the side and on the higher overhangs of the house as well. If I could have the next slide, please. The proportion of our garage in the back, it is slightly larger than the existing garage. We've taken the same cues from our hip addition here by running those details and the cornice work around. We've introduced a hip roof for this. Proportionally, the window openings, the rhythms of these things are all compatible with the existing structure and with the additions that we're proposing. So if you could go to the next slide for me. Again, the view from the alley of that garage, you can start to see how these proportions are connecting back to those visually as well. Again, the connections between these things coming through and an image of the garage as it's viewed from the backyard. This view, for clarification, and technically this one because the fence aren't visible from the public way, but to give you an idea of the proportion and the care we've taken to make these things compatible, I wanted to show you that. How about the next slide for me, Cade? Again, as I mentioned before, we are taking this section off. We're removing this roof and removing this existing chimney. Have the next one for me, please. This is the new roof plan. There's the deck below. There's the hip structure. There's the existing one-story hip side porch. We are on this high gambrel roof facing east. We are putting solar panels. If you go back 2 slides, I think, Cade. The solar panels are on this almost flat section of the gambrel roof. That affords us an opportunity for 21 of a required 28 solar panels that would allow the owners to offset a significant amount of their utility costs in the house. So these are not sloped. They are on 4-inch brackets. They will match the slope of the roof. They'll be blacked out. So we believe after our solar studies and visual studies, they'll be relatively invisible from the public way, visible only likely from the alley as you're looking up there. So you give me the next, okay. Again, just to give you to help clarify, this is the existing slope of that hip roof on top here. Here is our reconfigured roof for this section and our addition roof below. So you can see that we're picking up on the cues from the existing house and taking away what was a bit of an asymmetrical roof line for this house. So there's that terraced deck that we're moving and introducing this. The openings, the brickwork, and the foundation work is similar all the way around the house. Now we're replicating the paneling of those as well. Go to the next slide for me, please. Again, a flat elevation, less flattering, but again, a flat elevation is not a true experience of this. So the renderings and the eye position we've put in the renderings we think is more faithful to the visibility of those solar panels on the high side. That's the chimney that's being removed. This is just a boiler flue. It's not a working chimney in the house. So if I could have the next slide. Again, the other side, you can see how we're going back to the idea that we're stepping this down, trying to make the proportion of this house from the rear yard a little more pedestrian. And I think the next slide should show us, there you go. So this is the relationship of those garages. Our site slopes quite a bit to the back, so you can see that this is lower, but we've picked up on the same proportions and roof lines for the garage in the rear yard in terms of compatibility and cohesiveness of the site. All right, I think that might be, that's the Marvin window detail if anyone wants to review it. So I think that addresses all the issues that we've had on there. I think I spoke to a couple of the items that came up in your pre-review. So if you have anything else?
Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question about the solar panels. You mentioned that 21 of the 28 were going on that.
They're all going up there. We don't have room for 28. We're only putting
Oh, so
21.
20, okay, got it.
The consultant's calculation says we need 28. We're going to get 21.
Okay,
So-
got it. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. I have no questions. Does anyone have a motion?
I'll make a motion for 1221 Hinman Avenue, landmark, case 23 Pres 0064. I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness to construct a single-story rear addition, construct a single-story greenhouse addition at the rear volume, and alter the structure's rear volume fenestration and roof form at the existing non-original rear addition, demo a non-original rear deck and stair, construct a new raised deck at the home's rear elevation, demolish an existing detached garage, and construct a new single-story detached garage in the rear yard. Applicable standards, demolition 1 through 5, alteration 1 through 10, and construction 1 through 8 and 10 through 15.
A second.
No, we've already had our deliberation, but I was just rereading this, and I have a question for Cade really quick.
You can either add the solar installation, or I think the reason I left the solar installation off is that component can be done administratively. It meets the guidelines that they had, but I think the motion can include the solar installation as well as part of your testimony in the presentation.
So I amend the motion to include the solar installation as well on the east elevation.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have a second for that?
I'll second the amended motion.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
The next on new business is 833 Michigan Avenue, Lakeshore Historic District, 23 Pres 0067. Can staff read that into the record, please?
Kaufman O'Neill, applicant and architect, submit for a certificate of appropriateness to enclose an existing screen porch and construct a new one-story addition and screen porch at the home's rear volume. Applicable standards, alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 8, and 10 through 15.
Thank you. And the applicant, go ahead.
Hi.
If you could.
I'm Elizabeth Wall. This is my husband, George Alonso, and we just wanted to make a few comments before our architect tells you about the project. But we bought the house about a year ago after looking in Evanston for 15 years. We fell in love with it because it reminded us of my grandmother's house. And so we are slowly but surely trying to bring it from a home that was built in the mid-1890s for a single woman to fit a family of four and to really work for social gatherings that we are accustomed to having now in the 21st century. So with that, we have our proposal for our project to help us with that. So Mr. O'Neill is going to tell you what the project entails.
Thank you.
Thanks. I guess I need to sign in.
Yes, please. Did you sign in? Okay, if you could please do that, we would appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm Tim O'Neill from Kaufman O'Neill Architecture here in Evanston. The architects for Elizabeth and George for 833 Michigan Avenue. It looks like the info that we got from the Historical Society was that it was the building was built in 1894. And actually, Kate, if you go to the existing photos, that'd probably be great to start off with. Yeah, they're at the end. There you go. Right there, yeah. So on the left is the front facade on Michigan Avenue, and then on the right is the rear facade. So the existing home is a Queen Anne with a hipped roof with lower cross gables. It's definitely on the simpler side of the Queen Anne's. Definitely falls within the right period, and the massing and form are the primary aspects that are of the Queen Anne period. There's very spare detailing and ornamentation on the building, hardly any. We have found an old photograph of some of the original wood on it. It had some sunbursts and things like that at the top. It's all been covered over with aluminum siding. So the existing home has an asphalt shingle roof. As I said, aluminum siding, to replicate 5-inch exposure wood siding. Double hung windows. Throughout, there's a few on the rear elevation, non-original slider windows that would be covered over by the new proposed renovation and addition. And then there's a brick base from the first floor down and a brick footing as well, foundational and footing. So if you go to the first floor plan, that'd probably be the best way to describe, the other direction. That's basement right there. One more back. Perfect. Okay. So as Beth mentioned, the proposed project is a small addition to the interior space, really to increase the size of the kitchen and the eat-in kitchen. So at the bottom, kind of in the middle where there's an X through, there was an open porch that has since been enclosed, all non-original materials. So the first part of the project would be to enclose this porch area. And then up at the top, directly above the stairs in the kind of the center where the kitchen is, really where the kitchen sink is, there's about a 4-foot extension there on the back of the home as well. And then further to the east in the backyard is a new screened-in porch with kind of the chamfered bays that move around. There'd also be new stairs that go up and a covered landing on the rear of the home. There's some other modifications, interior modifications that are going to be part of this renovation. Obviously not within the purview because it's all pure interior work. But this is the basics of the proposed addition and renovation. If we could look at the renderings, the 3D views is probably the best. So the addition, this is the rear elevation then. So the addition would be a single-story addition coming off the rear of the home. So that would keep it in scale with kind of the rear yards there, with the garages that are back there, as well as a single-story addition on the home directly to the north that's similar in size and scale to what we're proposing here. The roof would be a lower gabled roof, and similar to what's on the existing home, because there's a hip roof with lower gables that come off of it. The exact proportions aren't exactly the same. That's primarily so that we can avoid touching any of the other windows on the second floor on this facade. We'd love to have that be the exact same proportions, but it's just not going to work unless we start to affect a lot of other windows. And then we're also doing the clipped corners underneath the gable, which was on the front of the home. And Kate, if you could go back to, sorry, these are far apart, but the existing front facade, the photo is maybe one of the earlier sheets. Yeah, on the left. So it's got what's almost like a bay window on the front, but then the gable goes out over. So we're replicating that detail and that massing, that form on the back, just to reference what's going on in the front. So the new work will be completely on the east side of the home. The siding that we're proposing is cementitious fiber boards, like a hardy board type of product, 5-inch exposure, which then matches the existing aluminum siding. The entire home is not being reclad at this point in time. We feel like this will be a really good solution so that it plays well with what's currently up on the home, and then also would position it nicely to be if in the future the rest of the home gets renovated and reclad, it would be a great material to do that and replicate the original wood siding, which we have no idea what kind of state it's in underneath that aluminum or how much of it's there. As I said, the existing roofing is asphalt shingles. The new roofing would be asphalt shingles to match. We would need to take off more of the aluminum siding on this back facade of the house. The way that we've worked the massing is we've worked hard not to have any of the new surfaces be coplanar with the existing, so there's setbacks, so that we've got good places to start and stop the materials, either inside corners or outside corners, with a few very minor exceptions. The base of the new addition, as you can see, would be brick, and again, brick to match the existing home as well. And then the new windows that are part of this addition would be double hungs and aluminum clad wood windows to match the windows that are not yet in but already approved and moving ahead with replacement of other windows on the home. So we feel like we've gone through all the standards and addressed, we believe, all the standards, and if not, we're happy to hit any of them that anyone has any concerns about. But in summary, the proposed addition doesn't destroy any of the distinguishing characteristics of the property. Primarily, it's the massing and form. So we're trying to hold back a little bit. It minimizes the impact on original materials of the building, and so a lot of the materials that we are impacting were not original to begin with, especially, it's primarily the aluminum siding. The way that we structured this, and especially on this side where we're stepping things back, it would allow for this entire structure to be removed in the future if someone did want to restore it back to its very original condition. It also allows, this addition allows for any further restoration, especially on the exterior, to take place in some logical steps, and sets it up, positions it in the future for that to be done. And the project considers the features and character of the existing home, by some of which by replication in smaller ways, but also refers to the cross gables and the clipped corners underneath the gable, but still tells the visual history of the home. So I think it'll always be obvious what part of this home was the addition and what part was original, while working very well, being very harmonious with it. So that's our presentation. And thanks for your time. And if there's any questions, we're happy to field those, especially relative to any of the standards.
Questions from commissioners? Go ahead.
Hi. thank you. Great presentation, and I appreciate you going through the standards that you were just referring to. Just one question. The new addition for the new screen porch, I really like that you are carrying that clip corner bit from the front to the new design for the back. I think that's a great reference there. But just wondering, it looks like the windows in the front, then they're like about a 45-degree angle. I'm wondering if you would have the opportunity to mimic the same massing and proportions and angles on the screen porch as well, just to be more definitive in the reference.
Yeah, we could. It was, honestly, it was a little bit of maximizing the space that was out there while those corners and not clipping them back too far and having the usable space in there. Certainly, if so, we didn't feel that the exact replication was critical to pulling that off and pulling off that reference.
Yeah, you still get it, but
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
That was it? Yeah.
That's it.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Does anyone have a motion? Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness for 833 Michigan Avenue, 22 Pres 0067, to enclose an existing screen porch and construct a new one-story addition and screen porch at the home's rear volume. Applicable standards, alteration 1 through 10, and construction 1 through 8 and 10 through 15.
You have a second? Jamie? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
All opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on C, letter C in the new business. 1323 Elmwood Avenue, landmark, 23 Pres 0068. Could staff please read into the record?
Sean Casey, owner and applicant, submits for certificate of appropriateness to alter the home's roofing material from a cedar shingle to asphalt shingle. Applicable standards, alteration 1 through 10.
When you're done signing in, you're welcome to begin.
Hi, I'm owner of 1323 Elmwood, and actually, it's a small project, so I don't have any pictures. I'm just looking to replace the existing cedar shingles with asphalt shingles. And that's the extent of the project. I had some other work that was going to be done on the rear of the house to replace an existing window that's falling apart as part of the whole effort with the contractor. But the main portion of the focus is to get the shingles redone and the gutters replaced. So, picture. So the contractor, after inspecting the property to give me quotes on the shingles and what was possible, the contractor pointed out that the original roof work there wouldn't need to be a lot of work there because it's not actually set up for cedar shingles to start with. And so he wouldn't have to add, it's most likely they wouldn't have to add the additional plywood that would likely be needed if you were going from a cedar shingle roof to a normal roof or an asphalt shingle roof. So it's about, I think it's, well, I don't actually know the age of the roof at this point. It's well over 10 years at this point. So one of the things that started the whole effort, or started the reasoning for looking into this, was the first insurance came out after a brief lapse in the insurance, and they wouldn't write another policy for the house with the age of the shingles and on the wood shingles. And then my insurance went up quite a bit when the next insurance policy came out, and they noticed it was wood shingles of 10 years or older. And so at this point, then it was running into 2016, 2017, and then we had the issues with getting wood shingles in the first place, so it was like extremely expensive. And that other houses in the area, you can see the house just to the north of me. Basically, all the houses in the area all have asphalt shingles. So at that point in time, it seemed like the appropriate thing just to move to the asphalt shingles. I'm going to be replacing the windows on the roof at the same time, just because they're getting old, and that's the recommendation of every contractor I talk to. But that's all in-kind replacement on the lighting on the roof. So that's all I'm looking to do at this point.
Yeah, just to clarify, he does have, there's two aspects of the proposal that have already been approved administratively. One's a non-original window and addition at the rear. It's just a 1/1 double hung window. And then the skylights, replacing the existing skylights in kind, same profile, same location.
Are you finished?
Yes,
Okay.
That's all.
Sure. So I have a question or two.
Sure.
One is that I see that there are multiple roof elements, including the roof on the porch, across the front of the house.
Yes.
And so are you proposing to put the same shingle everywhere?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to do that as well as the garage and back.
So could you talk a little bit about what you propose to use, what product you propose to use?
I have examples. These were given to me by the contractor. I don't know if you want pictures. It's Timberline. Timberline was the name of the product from GAF. I'm not all that familiar with it, but these were all provided as samples from the contractor. So Timberline HDZ was his recommendation. And then Cade, I believe, in the same catalog, I provided Cade with the catalog, and the recommendation was potentially that or the Timberline AS2, which I believe is a slightly sturdier model of the same design. Oh, there we go.
What page are you on, Kate?
Oh. Sorry, I don't have samples.
So the Timberline AS2, is that what you're?
Well, the original recommendation from the contractor was the Timberline, let's see, the Timberline HDZ, which is on page 4, I believe.
So what page is that in our packet?
I mean, the Timberline HDZ is like a pretty standard architectural shingle, and I think the difference with the AS2 that we talked about is that it's a slightly thicker profile that somewhat better mimics the edge thickness of a cedar shingle. And then we had also talked about, I think, the Grand Sequoia as well, which is also a thicker profile shingle. And I know your roofing contractor had originally talked about this Camelot 2, which almost replicates more of like a slate roof in a way.
Right. I have quotes for all of them. As part of this effort, I wasn't sure which way we were headed, so I just got new numbers on each one. The Grand Sequoia is quite a bit more expensive than the other two, but that's just based on the quote from the contractor.
So Kate, if you can, so when you say thicker, you mean that edge thickness, so that when you're standing on the sidewalk looking up at it, it appears to have some effectively height.
Correct. I'd say the AS2 has a slightly, I think it's like a double or triple laminated shingle compared to the normal asphalt shingle. And then the Grand Sequoia is a little bit thicker profile, but yeah, the edge thickness is
thicker
what I'm
than
talking
2
about.
or 3?
Correct. Yeah, I think that's the thickest of the asphalt shingles you can get on the market.
Do you have a color in mind that you would like to propose to us?
No, not at the moment. I was going to pick something that was probably as close to what it is now, but that was all I was looking to do.
I talked about like more of a weathered.
Oh, yeah, weathered look that, I don't have the exact name of the.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure that we can talk about color. We can talk about the materiality of the shingle, but I'm not sure that, I mean, that's up to the owner to pick which color he thinks fits the house, but I'm not sure that the ordinance allows for color.
We've talked about color in the past.
Oh, okay. On the roof?
Or the roof,
Okay,
yeah.
fine.
My intent is to essentially match what I have as far as the
Sure.
current city, or something very close to it, nothing outlandish or extreme. But it's basically to match what's already there.
I'd have to look through the standards. There are some, there is a handful of standards that make reference to color.
Okay.
I think you're open to suggestions on
Yeah,
what it looks. I think typically a more weathered look is more appropriate instead of it always looking like a brand new roof.
that's right.
I mean, to clarify, the reason why I asked this because we usually are presented with a proposal to say yes or no to, and we're not getting that right now.
No, that's fine. I think the clarification of a more weathered look that's helpful. So,
Okay.
thanks.
You had a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I heard you mention something about, with the contract, one of the roofing contractors said that he didn't think that the roof had originally had was set up for cedar shingles or wood shingles.
That's right.
Can you just speak a little bit more about that and what input you got regarding
Sure.
what
actually-
might have been there before the existing wood shingles?
And I'm not a roofer, so, but he was pointing out that typically with the wood shingles, you'd have more space and you need ability for the shingles to have more ventilation. And he looked at the existing roofing that's here, and between the cracks is asphalt covering. And he said this is typically not what you would see on a wood shingle roof. So essentially what he believes was done was they went from an asphalt shingle roof and then put on the cedar shingles to qualify. I don't know if that's exactly why they did it, but then put on the cedar shingles. And now on portions of the roof, it doesn't breathe. I'm getting moss growing in the shingles, and as you can see in some of those pictures. And so he says he believes, without knowing the entire picture, because part of the attic is covered, he can't see the whole thing, but he believes what he's going to discover when he pulls away the wood shingles is a roof that's ready for asphalt shingles, and he won't have to layer the entire roof with plywood as you would have to do on a normal cedar shingle roof. So that's the expectation right now. I can't, we haven't done the full inspection or anything like that, which would happen when the shingles actually come off.
Right.
So it's sort of in an awkward spot in the sense that what is there was probably a roof for asphalt shingles, and then to get the look of the cedar shingles, they just simply put over the asphalt shingle roof, the cedar shingles, without the proper ventilation that was probably required.
Okay. Thanks for the background. I was just looking at the City of Evanston survey form here. Do we know a date of this? Because this quotes the wood shingle roof. I was just curious, where do we find the date on these? I'm on page 94. I was just trying. I just didn't see a date. When
Just
this
where
was
where it references the roofing material?
Yeah, at the very lower left corner, roof material, wood shingles. But then, when was this survey actually recorded? I just couldn't find that.
Yeah, this was done in 2015. I did search the permit record. I can't
yeah.
find, it looks like the last time the roof was replaced was sometime between 40 and 50 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Which, unless it was replaced in between, otherwise, but
That I didn't know.
it wouldn't surprise me if that was a 40-year-old roof.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for the information. I was just trying to understand maybe a little bit more information about what had been there before this one that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, they probably did. I don't think they looked at, to try to do a deep dive on what the original material was. I'm sure that was just when they
Right,
surveyed the
right.
building, they identified what the roofing
Right,
material
probably
was.
just what they saw.
Yeah.
Bought it in
Yeah.
2006.
Yeah, I understand that.
And I only have pictures of when they resurfaced the house and things like that. I don't know if they did the roof prior.
So Kate, I have an administrative question, or logistics question. What are we, when we do in this situation where we don't have like a fully formed proposal, what is do we just say we're going to agree that he could do asphalt shingles and then he works with you? We just say, that he needs to make sure go through you? How, can you
I
explain
think
to
it
us?
depends. I think it's unusual where there's a homeowner that's receptive to the commission's feedback on, in the range of replacing it in asphalt. I think he's receptive to what that exactly looks like in order to be slightly more complementary to the existing condition. So the commission could make a motion to approve one if they feel there's one that's more appropriate than the other. If they feel like they're all appropriate, that would also be okay. Or if you would like to say that you are comfortable with the replacement for asphalt and you would like, staff to come to an agreement with the owner on which exact material, that would be fine as well.
Does everyone understand that response? Okay. Do we have some consensus of how we'd like to move forward?
I'm fine with having the staff review and come to a determination with the applicant on what the exact system is.
With any sort of guidance from us?
I'm comfortable with the options that have been shown, that they can come to a conclusion between those. I mean, nothing that wasn't on the table tonight.
Okay, so anything that was discussed during the presentation is fine? Okay. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, would someone like to make a motion?
Sure, I will.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, for the property at 1323 Elmwood Avenue, case number 23, Pres 0068, I move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for to alter the home's roofing material from cedar shingle to asphalt shingle. Applicable standards are alteration number 1 through 10.
Are you going to add anything about?
And I move that we allow the selection of the exact shingle manufacturer and color, type, everything, to be administratively, to be worked through administratively with the staff. Is that fair?
Do I have a second? Okay. We have a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes, minutes of April 11th meeting. Does anyone have any comments on that? Commissioner Klein?
Just make a motion to approve the minutes for the April 11th meeting, please.
Okay. Commissioner Bonin seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion carries. And then for the record, we already had the one item that was discussion, no vote will be taken. So we are on to adjournment. I would say that it is 8:28 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.